The answer past profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in billions of eons. I now see it, hear it, receive, and uphold it, vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us continue with our class on the Surangama Sutra. We are currently making the observation of the cause of delusion, the cause of confusion. In our previous class, I think you have already obtained some understanding from the content. The cause of confusion is ignorance, and the cause of ignorance is that there is no cause for it. It is simply out of a spontaneous and sudden coincidence, there is ignorance. Today, let's look at the sutra. It says that one who obtained bodhi is like a person who wakes to realize the events of a dream. Even though his mind is awake and clear, he cannot get hold of things in the dream and physically display them. So this person who just had a dream, in his sleep, at the time he wakes up from the dream, all of the things that had happened in the dream, all of those experiences in the dream, though that this person knows them clearly, and he is very smart, really sharp, and he would be able to talk about all the things that had happened in his dream. However, how could you let him get a hold of things that appeared in his dream? How could he grab those things and display them in front of others from the dream? That is very difficult. The dreams, as we're very familiar with, it is simply confusion. And such cause of confusion would lead to the fruition of dream, of confusion. The most you can do about dreams is to describe them with your language. Other than that, there is no way for the one who woke up from the dream to get a hold of the things that displayed in the dream, and there is no way for that person to display the whole dream in front of the others. How much the more is that the case with some things which is without a cause and basically non-existent? The most you can do is to tell others about your dream, but other than that, there is nothing. It is similar to delusion, to the cause of confusion, as we had stated that there is really no cause to it. It is simply just a delusion. It is just like the horn to a rabbit and hairs of a tortoise. How could you display it to the others? Because there is no such kind of confusion, such cause of confusion is nowhere to be found. Now, this part is through the example of dreams could help us to understand that the nature of all phenomena is cannot be obtained. And the next example, the Buddha continued to say that such as Yajnadatta's situation that day in the city, was there any reasons why he became fearful for his head and went running about? I hope that you can remember the name Yajnadatta, because next time whenever people would ask you about the cause of confusion, you could tell his story. It is said that Yajnadatta's name means being born in a temple. Yesterday, when we talked about Yajnadatta, the news of how Yajnadatta all of a sudden went crazy. Is there really a cause and a condition that is solidly existent, which led to his insanity? He simply went insane, not because he truly lost his head. Rather, it was out of this delusion. He all of a sudden felt that he lost his head, and then he got quite worried, and then he got insane. Was there any reason why he became fearful for his head and went running about? if his madness were suddenly to cease, it would not be that he had obtained his head from somewhere outside. At the time that he was being insane and was running about, but then all of a sudden, his sanity downed. All of a sudden, he got back to his normal state out of no reason, almost like without cause and without conditions. This kind of causeless and conditionless insanity just suddenly stopped. It is not that his head all of a sudden came back to his body. It is not like that. Because his head had never parted from him. He had never lost his head. His mind started to get back to the normal state not because he got his head back, because he had never lost it. And so before his madness ceases, how could his head have been lost? At the time when he went insane, his head was perfectly sitting on his body, sitting on top of his neck. And when such insanity all of a sudden stopped, his head was still exactly where it was. The news of Yajnadatta expounded by the Buddha is quite interesting. The wise ones, the ones with great wisdom, can tell such a great story in detail. At the time of studying Surangama Sutra, I think many people would feel that the great compassionate Buddha's teaching are quite profound. We're not even looking at other aspects of his teaching. If we were to simply make analysis of the Buddha's teaching from the angle of logic and eloquence, we can see that it indeed is very different, quite unique and unusual. Currently, we have studied Surangama Sutra for around 40 or so classes, and throughout we had been trying very hard to focus on the wisdom of the Buddha, to follow his train of thoughts. This kind of sutra, this is simply just one sutra, and the Buddha had taught so many wonderful teachings throughout his life that is hard to imagine for any mundane beings, such as the Lotus Sutra, Vimalakirti Sutra, Diamond Sutra, Prajnaparamita Sutra, the Medicine Buddha Sutra, and what are you saying? The Six Patriarch Sutra? That's not taught by the Buddha. What else? We just talked about Vimalakirti Sutra, the Sutra of Infinite Life, the Contemplation Sutra. We've only studied a few of those. Look at the Tripitaka's text, the Qianlong Emperor's version of the Tripitaka. They're so much thicker and bigger. It has about 108 volumes. That's according to the Tibetan tradition of Tripitaka. We only studied 4 to 5 of them. On the other hand, as Buddhists, we've been continuously studying the sutras, so that's pretty good. Anyone else that is currently studying and giving teachings on the Surangama Sutra? At around this time? You mean this evening? Are there anyone who's also giving teachings of the Surangama Sutra like me? Comparatively speaking, though we didn't study that much of the sutras, it is very limited that we had studied the sutras. But I think we're still doing all right considering the situations. Within our very limited lifetime, if we can finish reading the Tripitaka, the whole volumes of it, that would be really wonderful. If we can just simply read it through once, because it's very difficult for us to finish studying it throughout our life. If we can finish reading it, that would be still really wonderful. And then the Buddha continued to say in the sutra, saying that purna, falseness is the same way. How can it exist? When Yajnadatta went insane, it is because he thought that he lost a head. For the same reason, the sentient beings also are suffering. And that is because of the false mind as well, this confusion as well. The sentient beings are currently wandering in samsara because of this falseness. What is the cause of it? Where can you find it? Yajnadatta went insane because he thought he didn't have a head. But the head had never changed. Our nature, our disposition also get confused in the samsara. But what's the cause of such confusion? It is ignorance. But where is ignorance? There is no entity of such ignorance. It is simply just the same as when Yajnadatta thought that he lost a head. And we can say that it's simply a manifestation of being ignorant. All existence of this world is also a type of ignorance, a confusion. All you need to do is not follow discriminations, because none of the three causes arises when the three conditions of the three continuities of the world, living beings and karmic retributions, are cut off. The Buddha over here tells Puruna that if you do not follow the discriminations of such conventions, then the three things, the inanimate world, the causes, and the fruitions, as well as the animate world, the continuities of such would be eradicated. Because of the three conditions that had been eradicated. Without the resource, how would you be able to see the continuity? If we do not hold on to the animate and inanimate world, if we do not grasp onto it, then the three conditions will be eradicated. In such a way, the continuity of the inanimate world, the causes and fruition, as well as the sentient beings, in such a way, the three confusions would not arise either, that is, the killing, stealing, and the sexual misconduct. The next verse is quite well known. It says that then the madness of Yajnadatta in your mind will cease for itself, and just that ceasing in body. This is such a well-known quote from the Surangama Sutra, and people can usually speak of it. Over here, the Buddha says that the Yajnadatta from the city, his confusion, his insanity suddenly rests, suddenly disperses naturally. And at the time that it stopped, the madness stopped and ceased. That is Bodhi. That is to point out Yajnadatta simply had a misunderstanding of what had happened. He thought that he lost the head at the time of looking into the mirror, just waking up from his dream, and then he thought he was he had lost his head after had gone insane and running for a while. Nothing had happened, but he simply recovered to his natural state, to his normal state. this particular teaching on the madness in your mind will cease of itself, and just that cease in Bodhi is quite profound. Because the fruition of sentient beings is exactly the same. To attain a fruition for the sentient beings is exactly the same. We would think that there is this mind that is confused, and later, at the time of naturally recognizing the nature of this mind, that is obtaining of the Bodhi, attainment of the Bodhi. It means that this insanity, this dualistic thought, at the time of at the time of ceasing, this cessation aspect is Bodhi. If we were to use a simpler language, a layman's language to explain it, it is that at the time of the cessation of the dualistic thoughts, that is Bodhi. So we need to cease the dualistic thoughts, the impure mind, then at that moment of cessation, it is Bodhi. From the surface, it seems that there is the madness, and after the madness stopped, the stopping part is the Bodhi. It is just to say that in the Four Truths, by relying on the truth of path, there is the cessation of afflictions. That is the true Bodhi. That is usually stated by the Sutrayana teachings, but according to Mahaati, at the time of all kinds of wild minds and thoughts were arising, at the time of arising, at the time of recognizing the nature of it is already Bodhi. So that's the difference between the explanations of Sutrayana and Vajrayana. At the time of recognizing the nature of mind, the Vajrayana, especially to give you an example, in the treasure of Dharmadhatu, including the flight of the Garuda, both expounded that the clear mind, the nature of clear mind, without any alternation, without any changes, it is already Bodhi. That's the same meaning. It is to say that our mind at that state is already Bodhi. If you can't memorize the whole of the Surangama Sutra, you should remember this verse so that whenever people would ask you some profound teachings, you can just quote from the Surangama Sutra by saying that the madness in your mind will cease of itself, and just that ceasing in Bodhi. Maybe the person who questioned you would be able to attain liberation. Well, we never know. And then in the sutra it says that the supreme pure bright mind originally pervades the Dharma realm. It is not something obtained from anyone else. This pure, supreme, luminous Tathagata is originally pervades all of the Dharmadhatu. It is not obtained from anyone else. Though that the fact that you can see it is very much based on the Guru's direct pointing out, or the Buddha's direct pointing out, so that you can see it. But is it that there is something that is obtained from the others? That is Tathagata. That is not. Just like saying that, did Yajnadatha lost his head and then somehow got his head back? It is not someone give back his head. Rather, it is because we don't know it. It is that we haven't recognized it ourselves. We have been dwelled in confusion, and the Guru would point out through pith instructions. At the time of pointing out, you would be able to see it. However, this bright mind has not been obtained by you from somewhere else. It is simply that the teacher has pointed out that you were confused and you made mistakes, and then corrected such kind of wrong view. Other than that, there is nothing that is luminous been given by your teacher, from your teacher to you. It is simply at the time of being confused with the pointing out as the external condition, as the cause, then you recognized it. That is why it is the kindness of the teacher. And in the sutra over here says that why then labor and toil with marrow and joint to cultivate and be certified? Since we've already have those qualities perfected within ourselves, then why to exert those efforts in the ascetic practices? According to the Tibetan translation, it says that why to toil one's physical body and mind to seek for liberation, to seek for insights. It means that since we already have them, then why to go through those kinds of torture and exertion and ascetic practices to find a liberation? It is to say that the practice is no practice, and no practice is the practice. In this kind of realization, if you can reflect upon yourself and recognize it, then that's it. So the example is quite well stated. This person had never really lost anything. It is simply that he, out of his confusion, thought that he lost his head. Similarly, the sentient beings like us, we had never lost our nature. It is only because of our confusion and delusion we have not recognized it, and then we lost our direction. So the length and the time that we lose those directions, we lose the sight of our nature, is very much depending on our causes and conditions and our karma. And then there's another example. The Buddha says that this is to be like the person who has a wish-fulfilling pearl sold in his clothing without realizing it. Maybe this person is very forgetful or just completely foolish that he forgot about this wish-fulfilling pearl that could grant him everything that he wished for, but he couldn't remember it. And then he roams about in a state of poverty, begging for food and always on the move. It is very much similar to us. This person may seem to be very foolish, but same as us, each and every sentient being like us, we have the nature. The nature of our mind is just like a wish-fulfilling jewel. But without our ignorance, we had no idea that it's with us. And then we are roaming about in samsara without knowing it at all. Although he is indeed destitute, the pearl is never lost. Over here it says that though that this person who has this wish-fulfilling pearl sold in his clothing is suffering in the state of destitute, but he has this wish-fulfilling pearl that he had never lost it. Master Zixuan said that though following the waves of birth and death, the nature or the awareness is constant. This awareness, sometimes according to the Sutrayana, is called the bodhicitta, sometimes it's called the enlightened, wondrous nature, sometimes the wondrous bright mind, and over here the Master Changshui calls it as the awareness that is constant. In Tibetan languages, Rigpa, but the term of Rigpa, or the translation, direct translation of that, is not used as often as in the translation from Tibetan into Chinese language. So the mind that recognizes the luminosity of Tathagata is called Rigpa. Without recognizing it, it is not called awareness or Rigpa. So this kind of awareness has never been lost or destroyed or damaged. Just like this person who suffers from destitute has this wish-fulfilling jewel always intact in his clothing, but he would go around and keep begging for food and suffering. Later, when people point out there is something that could bestow you everything, he would be able to find it. Suddenly, a wise person shows him the pearl. All of his wishes are fulfilled. He realized that he could do everything, he could have everything, he would be able to obtain great wealth, and he realized that his pearl did not come from somewhere else other than himself. At the time of having all the wealth that he wishes for, he also gained great respect from the others. In Tibet, we usually say that if a nephew has wealth, then the uncle would recognize him as the nephew. If the nephew doesn't have money, then the uncle would call the nephew as his servant to the others. I think it is common for people to only recognize the ones with power or with wealth. For the kind of people without wealth, without capacity, without wisdom, then the others would not take that person very seriously. Similarly, this particular beggar, at the beginning, nobody really respected him, but after he discovered he has this wish-fulfilling jewel and he could have lots of wealth, everybody started to revere him and respect him. But this particular wish-fulfilling pearl did not come from anywhere else outside. It has always been carried by him. Now Ananda shows up. Yesterday we kept on calling, where is Ananda? Now he finally shows up. We haven't seen you for so long. It's been quite a while. So Ananda then bowed at the Buddha's feet, arose in the great assembly and said to the Buddha. Ananda seems to be very respectful to the Buddha. Did Purna? No, Purna did not pay prostration to the Buddha. And then Ananda continued to say that the world-honored one now explains that when the three conditions of the karma of killing, stealing, and lust are cut off, the three causes for them do not arise. Ananda here says that since the three karmas of the killing, stealing, and lust are the conditions of them are cut off, so the causes for them do not arise. And then the madness of Yajnadatta in the mind sees of itself, and just that seizing is Bodhi. Over here, it means that the mind naturally attains the Bodhi. It is not by other causes and conditions that produces the Bodhi. But Ananda mainly repeats this particular verse to repeat the Buddha says that, isn't that you said that the three conditions are cut off, therefore it is not produced from causes and conditions? Because the arhats are very much they place a great importance in causes and conditions. Since we talk about how everything arises from causes and conditions and everything ceases because of the ceasing of causes and conditions, that's what the great Shramana stated. Also the mantra of dependent arising. The arhats attain realization because of they understood that dependent origination and the emptiness of nature. This has been expounded clearly in entering the way of great vehicle. And over here, Ananda asked that since the arhats attained realization in such a way, then this madness just cease, and ceasing is Bodhi. If it is just spontaneously arising, it is not really fitting to that teaching. And then he continued to state that it is not something that's obtained from anything and anyone else. These clearly are causes and conditions. Why then does the thus come one abruptly rejects causes and conditions? It was through causes and conditions that my mind became enlightened, Ananda stated. It was because of listening to the Surangama Sutra, Ananda attained the first fruition, if you remembered. And then he continued to address the Buddha, saying that world-honored one, and that is not only true of us who are young in years, of us sound hearers who still have to study. It is not just for all of us who are the young Shramanas who then attained some realization through the causes and conditions. In fact, including some of the great Shramanas, such as Madhgalyayana, Shariputra, and Shruputi, who are now in this assembly and who followed the elder Brahmins, became enlightened and obtained the state of no outflows upon hearing the Buddha expound upon causes and conditions. All of these senior Brahmins, because they have listened to the teachings of causes and conditions and then made the aspiration and attained realization. This is one way of explanation. The Tibetan translation is the same as this particular translation, but according to Master Zixuan and in the commentary of Holding the Palms, it's a bit different because the way they explained is that these group of practitioners, the Madhgalyayana and so on, first studied from the senior Brahmins. They studied from the senior Brahmins at the beginning and then listened to the causes and conditions from the Buddha. And because of listening to the teachings of causes and conditions, they attained realization. I think this is probably a better way of listening. This is a better way of explaining it, since it states that they followed the older Brahmins. And now the Buddha, you're saying that Bodhi does not come from causes and conditions. So the spontaneity that Maskari, Goshaliputra, and the others advocated in Rajagriha then becomes the primary meaning. This person, his name is Maskari Goshaliputra, who is of a heretics teacher. He advocates that people would be able to naturally and spontaneously attain enlightenment. He said that if people were to just abide in spontaneity, then in the time of 80,000 kalpas, they would naturally be able to attain liberation spontaneously. In such a way, the Buddha isn't that you're saying exactly the same opinion that's advocated by the heretics teacher. Ananda over here says that I only hope you will let fall great compassion, so bestow us great compassion and break through my confusion. Ananda here pleads to the Buddha, saying that please, out of your great compassion, dispel our delusions and confusions and turn the wheel of Dharma to us. The question Ananda asked is rather quite sharp. He's saying that, well, your points of view isn't that the same as the heretics teacher? But then, right after he asked such a sharp question, he pleads to the teacher, saying that, please, out of your great compassion, give us teachings. It seems that Ananda developed this guts to speak so sharply to the Buddha, saying that your opinion is so much similar. It's exactly the same as the heretics advocate. Let's look how the Buddha replied to Ananda. The Buddha said to Ananda, let us take the case of Yajnadatta in the city. If the causes and conditions of his madness cease, the nature that is not mad will spontaneously come forth. The entire principle of spontaneity and causes and conditions is nothing more than that. Now the Buddha started to debate Ananda, saying that let's see who upholds the heretics' point of view. Ananda, come here. Ananda gets scolded quite a lot, sometimes by the Buddha, sometimes by the others, including the Matangi woman and the mother of the Matangi woman. The Buddha told Ananda, saying that, well, look at Yajnadatta, look at the case of Yajnadatta. He indeed went insane for a period of time. He went to the asylum and then came back, and now he's okay. He's normal again. When he went insane, when there's lunacy, if such causes and conditions for lunacy ceases, though for a period of time he indeed went insane and started to run outside madly, but at the time of the causes and conditions of such lunacy ceases, the normalcy started to spontaneously manifest. Ananda thinks that causes and conditions are reasonable but not spontaneity. However, if the Buddha were to say that at the time of how madness ceases and ceasing is bodhi, it is also a spontaneous production, he thinks in such a way. But the Buddha asked, well, at the time of the madness cease, this normal mind, that one that is not mad, would naturally appear, isn't it? At the time of the madness cease, the mind itself is just like that. It is normal. It is not mad. Other than that, there is no constantly existing spontaneity that exists, which is completely different than the heretics' preaching. At the time that madness ceases, when a person returns to the normal original state, though that there is madness in the middle when it happened, but then returns to normalcy, then you can still say that person is normal. At the time when madness ceases, this is called causes and condition. And then the nature, at the time, the nature of the mind that appears, it is also, you can say, a type of spontaneity, or you can say that ceasing is bodhi. The Buddha continued to say that Ananda, Yajnadatta's head, was spontaneously there. It was a spontaneous part of him. There was never a time when it was not. Why then did he suddenly fear that he had no head and start running about madly? Well, the other day we listened to the video where a person with doctorate degree said that he finished reading Surangama Sutra overnight and he understood it. But I really don't know if that's true because it's quite difficult to understand. If I were to have the opportunity to actually meet him, I would like to quiz him and see if he truly understands it. Over here, the Buddha asked Ananda, saying that while Yajnadatta's head was spontaneously there, he already has his head, isn't it? And this head had never left his body. It has always been there. At the time of Yajnadatta running wild and madly, or at the time of looking into the mirror, thinking that he lost his head, and after he came back to, while realizing he has his head all the time, at all times, in fact, nothing had happened to his head at the time. Why then did he suddenly fear that he had no head and started running about madly? For what reasons? For what causes and conditions? Can you find the causes and conditions? His head was always there. If his head was actually parted from his body even for a bit, then that is a cause and condition for him to go mad for something that has truly happened. Just like if we were to lose a yak inside of a herd of yaks, if we were to lose that yak, then we won't be able to find it. I believe in the Madhyamika teachings, it also states that if we were to lose our mind, it is not like to lose a yak, where indeed somewhere in the middle we lost the yak. But the loss of the mind or being confused is not like that at all. There has never been a loss of the mind. So the Buddha said that there has never been a cause and condition for the head to be lost, which then caused Yajnadatta to run fanatically. The sutra says that if he naturally had a head and went mad due to causes and conditions, would it not be just as natural for him to lose his head due to causes and conditions? So since the head is already there, but because of the causes and conditions of looking into the mirror, the mind started to go wild. But the head is there. It is only looking into the mirror made him think that he lost his head, and then the mind started to go wild. He has a head. He simply looked into the mirror out of whatever causes and conditions. He didn't see his head, and then he got really terrified, which is very similar to many of us. Whenever we get into an argument, whenever we say anything negative or had any kinds of those encounters, then our mind would start to go wild, start to get anxiety and fear and think that is that the demon coming, or is that a bad omen to signal me that someone I love is going to leave me. So the mind would start to go wild. The more you hold on to it, the more it will make you feel that it's really severe. But it had never happened. Nothing like that had ever happened. But this kind of mad mind, is it already existent, or is it because of causes and conditions, which then made your mind to go wild? If you went mad because of causes and conditions, would it not be just as natural for him to lose his head due to causes and conditions? We could simply ask the other way around. Because of spontaneity, because of this natural cause and conditions, why couldn't Yajnadatta to lose his head for causes and conditions? Basically, his head was not lost. The madness and fear arose from fearness. He had never lost his head. It is only because he went mad and then he started to have lots of fear and delusion. At the time of having fear and delusion, nothing had ever changed. So his head had always been there, at the beginning, middle, and end. This example is really wonderful because there is such profundity in it. It is to say that at the time, usually when we don't see the nature of our mind, if we can use the analysis to at least understand it, that's really wonderful. The way how the Buddha made this analysis is quite rare. If we were to play Yajnadatta, I think each of us would be very good at it. We would be able to make a very good analysis of it. We would be able to make up stories such as the beginning of how Yajnadatta didn't see his head in the mirror and how he went searching for it and how he couldn't find it and then what happened. The example that's given by the Buddha and his analysis is very close to the sentient beings, how we sentient beings got lost. So later on, if people want to ask, can you tell me where the ignorance comes from? I think it would be good for you to tell them about the Yajnadatta within the Surangama Sutra and use the story of Yajnadatta to make an analysis. Whenever I give teachings in different universities, people would ask me questions such as where the ignorance started. And then I usually would use the examples of clouds within the space because that's also used in many of the Mahayana teachings. The ignorance without any truly existent causes just like how within the space, the clouds would form. The space is unconditioned. Then how could it produce anything that is conditioned? This is more from the angle of the Uttara Tantra Shastra as well as the third turning of the wheel. But this example given over here can be explained from the second turning and third turning. This is a great example where it talks about the head had never been lost. It is simply because of the delusion and madness. Throughout the whole process of it being mad, the head had never even changed a bit at all. And then the Buddha continued to say that if the madness was spontaneous, the madness and fear would be fundamental. If you were to think that this madness is spontaneous, it is naturally already there, then this madness is a fundamental mind. It is the nature of our mind that has the ignorant existence or the existence of such kind of confusion. In such a way, the Buddha continued to ask, before he went mad, then where was his madness hidden? Before Yajnadatha looked into the mirror, if this madness is a fundamental mind, then the madness has been hiding in his mind, somewhere in his mind, when he was sleeping, before he woke up to look into the mirror in the morning. It's been waiting for an opportunity to act out, but that is not true. Because if you were to say that there is such kind of mad mind, then is it inside, is it outside, is it elsewhere? Once you make this observation, you would be able to understand it. When we studied the Uttara Tantra Shastra, we would say that this fundamental mind is our original mind, and this ignorant mind, though it accumulated a long period of time of causes and conditions, which we definitely recognize, but these causes and conditions cannot be found, and they are not reliable. So in this way, where can this mad mind be hiding? If the madness were not spontaneous, the Buddha continued to say, and his head were in fact not lost, why did he run about in a state of madness? If you realize that you have a head and recognize the madness of your pursuit, then both spontaneity and causes and conditions become idle theories. So over here, the Buddha says that if you were to think that you already had a head, but then later you thought you don't have a head and then went mad for that, and then originally you think that it is because of spontaneity, and later at the time of finding it is not existent, it is because of causes and conditions. But both causes and conditions and spontaneity are idle theories, which means elaboration. Since both of them are elaborations, the Buddha particularly addressed this to, first of all, Ananda, who holds on to that the spontaneity is advocated by the heretics, and then Venerable Purna thinks that the causes and conditions are not reliable. According to the commentary of Holding the Palm, it says that for example, Ananda over here thinks that out of causes and conditions is reasonable. But spontaneity is the same as what they what's advocated by the heretics. And Venerable Purna is more similar to the Mahayana view. He understands that the nature of mind is already existent and that is reasonable, but out of causes and conditions is not reasonable. At that time, though it seems that the Buddha is only answering to the questions of Ananda, but he is really addressing both of Ananda and Venerable Purna, saying that neither causes and conditions nor spontaneity is not correct, since there is no truly existent causes and conditions nor of the spontaneity. In fact, our mind, at the time of recognizing it, all of the confusion sadness would disperse. And recognizing it is not to regain it, is not to produce it, is rather the confused mind returns to its normal state. At the time of enlightenment, or we can probably use a different term for enlightenment, is to recover. When can it recover to become a normal person again? Each one and every sentient being in samsara is just like Yajnadatta. Each one of us is Yajnadatta, fearing that we don't have a head and start to run wild. At this time, if you were to meet a wise teacher who can point out to you that, look, you still have your head, and would show you probably your own image in the mirror, but maybe this person has too much of habitual tendencies of such madness. So the wise teacher would have to take a long time to cure the mad person, such as medicine, such as teaching this person, telling this person again and again, so that this person knows it from a theoretical point of view. But it takes a long time. If this person were to have lots of faith and were to have all the causes and conditions which would lead him to return to normalcy, this person would be able to get normal again. That is to say that over here, the idol theory refers to causes and conditions and the spontaneity. They're all conceptual elaborations. The idol theories in the Tibetan language translated as the dualistic thoughts or dualistic conceptual elaborations, which is the same as the Madhyamika teachings says that it's just the elaboration, just like a game.